Okay. Hey, welcome guys to Mystery Farm. So I have spent hours this morning going through this, what I want to talk about with manifestation and trying to put my thoughts together in a way that is somewhat slightly cohesive and not super rambling. Because when I go through these kind of subjects and topics, I mean, I hit on so many peripheral kind of connections with this that I get excited about it and I want to talk about it, but I'm going to try not to do that. So in my last video, I talked about, like the matrix, right? What is our reality? And then what I said I wanted to do was talk about how manifestation ties in with that structure and framework of us being, regardless of whether or not we're considering it a simulation or like a man-made simulation. I fundamentally believe we're in a lower reality, that there is a higher reality that exists above ours. So that's because I'm starting with my primary assumptions for you guys so that so we're all on the same page. So yeah, I think we're not in a top reality, we're in a lower reality. I believe that we agreed to be here for some reason and purpose. And part of the reason why I think that, by the way, is, again, I mentioned in my video yesterday, about the lover's card, but this is supposed to represent Adam and Eve, right? In the Garden of Eden and the angel there. And I essentially believe the Bible is all allegory, that essentially it gives us sort of the structure and framework, but in sort of a cryptic way. Because again, the matrix, part of its job is to be that shell of the egg and to hold us back until we're ready to break through to that next reality. Okay. Yeah. So, but in that story, in the Bible, in Adam and Eve, because I mentioned in the last one, I believe that the woman does lead in terms of connection to spirituality. And God basically says, like, I have this tree of knowledge, don't eat from it, or you get kicked out of the Garden of Eden. And then, Eve gets the apple and gives it to Adam, and the rest is us being in this this world and existence. Okay, so why is it the tree of knowledge though, right? Like, what knowledge is it that God was concerned about us having while we lived in the Garden of Eden? Okay, so moving forward though, because I'm going to come back to that, the tenets of the law of attraction, because that's a lot of how a lot of people come about and find like the concept of manifestation, right? Obviously it's a commonplace word for us at this point. We definitely talk about it just in general in spirituality, in sort of more secular terms, but as well as, for me being Wiccan, we talk about manifestations and spell work is a part of that. Right. But so a lot of people come to law of attraction, and the tenets of that are that the power of our thoughts has an impact on outcomes or events, and what you focus on becomes your reality. So I wanted to talk about belief versus knowing for a second, because so going back to that original sin in the Garden of Eden, I mean, I think that the matrix is that. I think the matrix is the apple, that's knowledge. That essentially we came to live in this particular world. I'm going to describe what I mean. Whereas okay, so that's essentially the matrix. Right. I'm not going to go too far down there and ramble. Just going to keep moving for my notes. Okay. So, so what are the rules of the matrix then? So if we do live in this lower reality, does it have rules like, and I'm going to use Minecraft, as an analogy for this part, because if we think about anybody who's played Minecraft before, you go in and you can play one of two ways. You can play in survival mode or you can play in creative mode, right? And basically creative mode has like, it eliminates a lot of those rules, and it eliminates the need to like collect items, for example, to collect resources to build something. And so, I think most people kind of see manifestation as like going into creative mode, right? But so if we're looking at Minecraft, then our world is the matrix, right? The world that you have. And again, I always want to go on these tangents about like when things spawn, whatever. Okay. But survival mode in this analogy then would essentially be the matrix programming on top of that, right? So the rules that you have to go and collect things in order to have, resources to build with, all those sorts of rules. So that's the software essentially that becomes like the rules that you abide to within that society. Okay. So for Minecraft, survival mode is the matrix programming. And so we think of, creative mode is where we'd be breaking that software, like hacking essentially, right? So how do you hack that program and manifest? Because that's essentially what I think, that if again we're talking about a construct where this is a lower reality, but we're acknowledging that it is a physical one, right? That our matrix is our physical reality that we're living in right now. Okay, then we essentially have to connect with where is, if this is an organic system that's essentially running this reality, what is that entry point between the physical and the programming, right? Like, what's that point of entry? Because obviously hackers go in on the back end into the code and they change things, right? They'll change things there. How do we change things within our matrix system to enter that hack into the system, right? And by the way, like, okay, because GTA 5, right? Grand Theft Auto. I used to love playing that game when hackers were rampant on it, because like I kind of sucked at the game in general, like doing the actual missions and tasks and stuff like that. So I was one of those people that just run around and like, rob things and go meet up with people and jump out of planes and, like do fun stuff. Because like the point of the game is to have fun. And honestly, I think, that is the point of this game and this reality as well, is to have, is to enjoy it. Not have fun in terms of like going and shooting and robbing people, though some people do, obviously. But anyway, in GTA, like the hackers would throw, like money at you from within the game. And so that was the only way I was able to, afford like my boat and all that stuff, is because like the hackers were nice to me. So hopefully the same happens in this reality as well, right? Because things like that do happen. Like people just win the lottery, right? But I think in terms of manifestations, because everybody manifests whether they realize it or not. The matrix is responsive to what we're putting back into it, right? It's sort of like this biofeedback system. Because like in the movie The Matrix, right? The dude talks about, Keanu Reeves is asking why did you make it like this, where it kind of sucks, right? Like where you have bills to pay and you have to work like a bunch of hours at a job that like you're not crazy about and stuff like that. Why is that, right? And the guy says, like, we tried a bunch of different variations, like where you guys were happy, like you ultimately fundamentally rejected that like ultra happy utopia because we doubted it. Essentially, we were like, that's not right. Things were too nice for us. But I think that that is, again, that is part of that original sin, that knowledge, right? A knowingness on some level of why we're here, like, but not on a conscious level. Because I think that the same thing would happen for us as well. And it often does. So if you think about when people win the lottery, like I'm sure you guys have all seen it at a certain point, like the stories of lottery winners who then go and lose it all, or like they have a bunch of like tragedy, come towards them. And it's like, why is that? So because people do manifest wittingly and unwittingly, but if you're unwittingly manifesting, and I'll get into that later, then that can be as simple as someone who is coming into work all the time saying like, oh, I'm going to get fired, I'm going to get fired, I'm going to get fired, and like, oh, she never likes me, like I'm going to get fired, right? Somebody who's constantly saying it at work, what ends up happening to them? Usually they end up getting fired. Like, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, essentially, because that person believed it. So our beliefs do matter, essentially, with regards to the matrix, because the matrix does respond to them. Again, I think that the matrix is the egg, right? And so it doesn't have any good or bad intentions. It's sort of neutral. It just doesn't want to break before you're ready. Do you see what I mean? So it is going to be responding and looking for positive ways just as much as negative ways. Because before you're ready to break out of the egg, you are going to be in those lower energy states. And so it's going to reflect that back to you, right? Okay. So the mechanics of manifestation. This is probably where I'm going to lose a bunch of you, but I like to look at it this way. Okay. So how does manifestation actually work in my mind? So the mechanics for me, how I kind of like to walk through this. So Tesla, right? If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Okay, so what is energy? E equals mc squared. Energy, mass, right? So and light. So, and that is our matrix reality here, right? That energy aspect of it, what we're living in, the environment that we're living in, is mass and light, right? Like that's we're we're made of mass. That wall is made of mass, and then the light is our perception of it. So okay. Then frequency and vibration. I always thought that it was weird that Tesla said frequency and vibration, because if you go into like the definition of those things, vibration is essentially like an oscillation, right? Like it's something vibrating. You're not supposed to use the word that you're defining in the definition, but you guys get it. Like it's an oscillation, and a lot of times it's referred to in like small, like in atoms and particles. You talk about like the oscillations. So, but anyway, the frequency is the rate that something happens over time, right? Over a given period. And usually it's a second. We'll talk about within a second. So yeah, hertz, for example, are frequency per second. Okay. So yeah, like I said, why does he talk about vibration and frequency then? Because something vibrates at a frequency. Why does he talk about vibration and frequency then? It's just always stuck with me for years. And I think that ultimately it's because he was talking about two different things. So I'm going to go into that a little bit more. Here, I drew something. Okay. So I want to talk about frequency and vibration when it comes to us, like as humans, as well as like the external world. Okay. So I made this little graph for you guys. Okay, so and I know I should have just like done it on the computer, but I was like sketching this out. So on this axis here, you can see I've got frequency And then I put it on a logarithmic scale. So it jumps from 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 100, 100 to 1,000. So it increases by a factor of 10 in each of those bars. And I did that for reasons. So anyway, and then, so then I put a line here, right? So it's a linear, going through the hertz down here at the bottom, right? So what I've got is brain waves, delta waves, theta waves, alpha waves, beta waves, and gamma waves. Okay, why did I do this? Right? The reason why I did it is because, okay, because basically there's a lot of discussion about like where the best way to manifest, right? Because you hear stuff about like meditation and all of that stuff. What I'm trying to do here is look at essentially, again, if we're trying to hack ourselves and the matrix, what is that entry point? What is like that 0 point between the matrix and us? So, and so a lot of people will talk about like that theta brainwave area for being ideal for manifestation, right? And what is that? So basically, going back to this graph, okay, so there, the delta, that's your dream state, okay? Down here, if you're going all the way down to 0, I mean, essentially you're dead, right? So this is basically low frequency brain waves that happen while you're deep asleep. Okay, then your theta state is kind of like where you're somewhat in between awake and asleep, like you're drowsy, you're dozing. It's kind of that space, and that's where for sure you can reach like the astral realm, is like right here. And okay, so then alpha is like when you first just wake up in the morning before you're actually thinking about anything. That's like the autopilot, like that's human autopilot, where you're just kind of like getting up, walking around, maybe going to the bathroom, right? So that's also a very receptive state though, in these areas. Beta is where you're doing like simple tasks that you don't have to think about very much. But, and then gamma is all going to be like the high intensity, like thinking, problem solving. This is also the range where a lot of emotions are. And again, like, so the higher, I think a lot of people, we talk about like in spirituality, being a high vibration, like you're supposed to be in a high vibration all the time, right? But what does that actually mean? Because when we're talking about this frequency is the number of times. Okay, let me show you guys a wave. Right. Okay. Right. I already drew it. Good for me. If this page is a second, right? So you've got when you get a wave here, okay. Okay. This part is a complete wave, right? So how many times does it do that in a given period of time? Okay. That's the frequency, is how many times it completes that loop. And it crosses this point twice. Okay. Okay. Right. That's frequency. Amplitude is intensity. So if you have the same wave, it can have the exact same frequency, but like a much higher amplitude. I'm going off the page, going back up, right? The height on this scale is the amplitude. So being in high vibration is not the same thing as being like high amplitude, right? The vibration is referring more specifically to the frequency. So there's a frequency of being happy, for example. There's a frequency of being sad or depressed, for example. And honestly, I kind of feel like, because, I tried to look up like the list of like emotional frequencies. And people make lists, but I have no idea where that comes from, and I don't believe it. I don't think that they know. Because that hasn't, it hasn't been scientifically measured, like the, you know, that a given emotional state has a given frequency. What they have done, you know, studies and experiments on is whether or not being in a high emotional state, like, so, okay, going back to my little, okay, I did draw this out earlier, right? So okay, this is the gamma. So that's that high emotional range. So if somebody is in a heightened emotional state of extreme anger or extreme joy, like they're really excited and happy or whatever, or if they're extremely angry, they're going to be in this high emotional processing area of the gamma range. Whereas like sadness tends to be a lower energy within that range. So I don't think so, and that has to do with amplitude, right? Because when you're sad, you can be extremely sad, like, you know, like crying, right? You know, just sobbing profusely. I think that has to do, like, again, though, with the amplitude of the emotion as opposed to the frequency of the emotion. So what am I saying? What I'm saying is that I don't think that manifesting is about being super happy all of the time. What I think it is being calm. I'm going to go. Okay, hang on. I'm going to go into this next part. Right. Okay, so one more thing on this, though. So did I point this out? So this theta state, again, this is where a hypnotist is going to operate, because you're most susceptible in this theta state. That's also where people suspect that, you know, you have the greatest ability to manifest is when you're in this area. But I think it's right, because you know, so the natural vibration and frequency of the earth is 7.83 hertz. So so that is right at the top part of the theta state. And I think that's right. I think that is basically like the entry point and where you need to be in terms of like introducing your hack into the matrix, your manifestation. Okay. So let me get. Okay. So that's my kind of like science part of it. But what do I actually think in terms of like how that works? So if we know where to put in our manifestation, and we're saying that like you have to be around that theta state to do it, right? But how does it work? And if we go back to that frequency and vibration, right? How does that work? So essentially, resonance, right? Here people talk about that a lot. Resonance. You have to like be in the same energy of whatever you're attracting. I think that's confusing basically to people, because like what is the energy of $1 million? Right? Because I like that. What is the energy of that? And I think that's why it goes okay. Right. I think it's essentially impossible to lock on to the exact frequency of like a specific thing, right? What I'm trying to say is if I'm trying to manifest what a coffee cup, right? If I'm trying to manifest a coffee cup, I would have to somehow find a way to match my frequency to the frequency of a coffee cup. How the hell am I supposed to do that, right? Like, and I don't think that you can, because essentially that's like it's, if you're just trying to make a coffee cup, again, that kind of runs into some of like our natural laws, which are part of like the matrix. Okay. But that's why, you know, I think people do like vision boards and stuff like that, right? Is because they're not trying to attract a coffee cup. they're trying to attract like essentially an energy of a life that they desire, right? And okay, so in terms of your manifestation, like how do you do it? I think that's the first thing that you have to do is like clearly define what it is that you want to see. And if it's a coffee cup, that's difficult. Do you see what I mean? Like, because you have to like mentally think of a way, a possibility essentially for that coffee cup to enter your life. I mean, I guess you would have great success if you then decided that you were going to go to Starbucks, right? And there's like, you know, you go to a place with a bunch of coffee cups. But at any rate, okay. So here's basically, so witches use the 4 elements, right? Earth, air, wind, fire, in all of their manifestations. And there's a reason that we do that. That's just beyond being witchy. For us, each of the elements has a meaning in terms of people and life. So air, for example, comes down to thoughts. The fire is creativity, can be passion. Water is emotions, and then earth is earth, right? It's the physical. But okay, so if we're thinking about that in a manifestation context, right? Like so the earth, the physical part of this is going to be your habits, essentially. That's kind of what it comes down to. I mean, I'm trying to, make this as practical as possible. Your emotions, okay? So I guess I'm trying to think of the best way to kind of get into all of this. But anyway, your air, the thoughts, okay? That's our programming. And this fire and creativity is essentially like, okay, when you think about what is creativity is being able to think of something novel, right? Whether that's art or music or whatever. A creative person is somebody that can see a vision of something that doesn't exist yet. And essentially, what is the highest point of creativity is essentially infinity. Okay. So this area is essentially about being limitless in terms of everything, right? Okay. I know this sounds confusing right now, but I'm going to try and go through it. So in order to manifest, these are the elements that you essentially need to combine to make a successful manifestation. And then how you enter it is that theta state, but I'm going to go into that in a second. Okay, so in terms of physical, like a lot of times when a witch creates something, right? Like if they create a protection bag, it's a spell that, is supposed to offer you protection. Then, she hangs that somewhere, maybe by her door, so that she sees it every time that she walks outside of the house. And it's a reminder of the intention that she had set and worked on before, that manifestation, right? That manifestation has a physical reminder that reconnects that person back to that energy, right, of protection. And so now it's an icon, it's a symbol to remind that. And so that's why you essentially see icons everywhere, and especially in religion, right? That was essentially probably the first iconography that we had as a culture and civilization, was through religion. And frankly, I think it's used for essentially the same reason, to reconnect someone. It's a visual reminder for someone to reconnect with their faith and their spirit. Okay, so in terms of the air, the thoughts piece of that, those are your thoughts. That is what you're consciously thinking that you want to bring into your life, right? So, but part of that is this and the fire aspect, both like have components of our matrix programming within them. Okay. Because, when we came here and we're born here, you're raised by your parents, you receive an education, you go out into society and you start to understand that, there's kind of rules for participating in society, for better or worse, right? Depending on which culture or society you're in, those rules are not necessarily to your benefit. Okay. But consciously thinking about what it is, the manifestation, as well as what that looks like. The fire piece, that limitless portion that I talked about, self-limiting beliefs are like a huge part of why manifestations fail. And self-limiting beliefs can take place in a variety of aspects, right? Like in terms of our physical world, as well as about ourselves and our deservingness of the manifestation. So, what can you think of that is possible, right? Is limited by, again, like those rules and laws of the matrix that we're familiar with. But just as much as it is there, we believe that it's also then restricted by all of the additional learned programming that we've received essentially since we were born, right? So, even though you may know about spirituality, I mean, and this is something that, I'm still working on myself, right? Even though you may know about spirituality, or you may understand the framework or context that you're working with, and even though you may tell yourself or know that you need to be believing in your energy, you can say like, I'm worthy, I'm worthy, I'm worthy of this. But if you don't really fundamentally believe that you're worthy of it, for a variety of reasons, right? That's why you're going to have trouble receiving that, is because, again, like essentially all the ways that manifestation, that thought may enter the matrix, then become limited, right? Like, well, it can't happen this way, or it can't happen this way, or it's not going to happen that way, right? Like we start to think of that the only way that I can receive $1 million is through the lottery, right? So do you see what I mean? Okay. And then water, emotions. And so obviously, like, you want to be able to control your emotional state, because I think that's where we come back into, I talked about the frequency versus the amplitude on this. Sorry. Right. So I talked about amplitude and frequency and where you should be in terms of like this scale. Should you be in this higher energy or not? Like, what I think is that, again, that it's going to mirror essentially the rest of this, is that so the energetically, a state of calm is going to be like actually even below sadness. Okay, so like in terms of this high emotional processing versus like lower emotional processing states. So when you're calm, because I put up here, like when people do that like the Om chant, right? And Om is supposed to be the vibration of everything, like the earth and everything on it, the frequency of sound that emanates as a collective whole. That's the concept of Om. And so that vibration is 432 hertz when someone chants Om. Okay. And that's also supposed to be the vibration of everything. Okay. When someone does that, when someone chants Om, it helps their brainwaves regulate back down into this alpha state, right? Which is then a lot closer to that theta state. Because again, here through our normal day-to-day, like how we're interacting is we're going to be in that beta, and a lot of times we're going to be in that gamma, especially when we're at our jobs all day and stuff like that. So like by getting back down to closer to that alpha state, that's why I think that the energy required is actually like calm, right? It's not about being like happy, enthusiastically happy all the time. And so I think a lot of people get frustrated with that, because a lot of like spirituality basically says like, oh, you have to be you have to be happy, you have to be positive, you have to, attract the things that you want. And so if you want to be happy, you have to be maniacally happy all the time, right? No, because actually, I think gratitude is a part of like being calm. Have you ever just sat out, I'm remembering back to like when I was in Peru, and so, I was sitting on this mountainside and the shaman were off like, with this other dude. So they were, singing and chanting and doing their thing. And I was just looking out over this valley and like the sun was on my face, like, and I just had such like this long and intense, serene moment of calm, comfort, safety. It was like being in the womb. You know what I mean? I just felt like the perfect temperature. I felt like perfectly happy and content, but like in this calm, like liquid sort of way where it's just throughout your entire body. That is the 0 point. That is the energy that helps you manifest in terms of the emotional state. So when you are working on your manifestation, that's essentially the emotional state that you want to be balanced in while you're thinking about your manifestation. So it's to be able to simultaneously hold that thought or that vision of like what you want to receive, as well as being in that like really calm, balanced emotional state. Because again, that's going to be the alpha, like very close to that theta, because that Schumann resonance frequency is like right at the top of the theta and below the alpha. It's that 7.83. Okay, and 8 is the cut between alpha and theta. Okay. So, right. So back to this, it's about holding the thought while you're in that calm state of emotion on the physical plane. Then, because it's not just thinking about it once, unfortunately, but if you then, go back and we're talking about frequencies, right? It's about coming back into that energetic state with a periodicity. Do you see what I'm saying? Right. So that is the frequency. It's not just a one-time thing. And it's why just like asking for something once and then letting go and releasing of it doesn't work. It is about coming back to this state and that thought, intention, and manifestation over and over and over and over again. So, that's why icons in the physical world are important, as well as, the habits, like coming back into that meditative, making sure that essentially you are going to that 0 point, that 7.83 frequency. So either in the alpha state or the theta state, being very close to that is going to help, kind of trickle your manifestation into it. But again, this is going to be really important in terms of balancing with this is having that limitless energy, not necessarily controlling the way that your manifestation is going to come, because kind of what I think happens is that when you drip, 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 like through over time with that frequency and periodicity, when you drip that back into the matrix, right? I think it goes back, and then it essentially, like how the matrix works, I think, is kind of like with fractals and chaos theory. So I think that it goes back in, and then it comes out in this overall like predictive way in terms of the matrix, but you can't see it like it looks like a bunch of random sequences of events. That's how chaos theory works. It's about there being large scale patterns of random behavior, right? So is it random or isn't it? But that's how I think that when you feed that energy back into the matrix, that it comes back and expresses itself. I think that's also why you have to do it repeatedly and a lot, right? Okay. So I think, again, I go super long on these things. I get excited and I like to talk about it. But so essentially that's kind of how I think our matrix ties in with manifestation, and how kind of fundamentally manifestation works in terms of being able to put that energy back. I also think that that's why it doesn't okay, going back to this, right? This is why it doesn't necessarily, like, you don't have to be awakened to manifest. You don't have to heal to manifest, right? But the difference is in terms of manifestation stability, once it goes into the matrix system, that if you are kind of okay, because when again you come with that waveform in terms of frequency, the reason why I think that you can hit it even if you aren't trying to do this is because like of the random nature of the world, right? Resonance is when two frequencies, one of them, they're close enough that one of them will shift into the other, and then the amplitude increases as a result of that shift and combination of those two waves. Okay, so I think that that can happen again, like if somebody is just in that higher state of intensity and sort of essentially catches a wave. Fundamentally, they randomly happen to match that same energy, and you can get these quick manifestations, right? That's how somebody wins the lottery, and that's why kind of just as quickly often like that energy leaves their life again. It's because it wasn't actually necessarily a long withheld manifestation where they were building that in with daily habits and like balancing their emotions and getting to that alpha or theta state, all of that stuff. You can randomly catch these waves. Then other people are doing this other ways, right? In terms of like negative manifestations, that woman that comes into work every day and says, I'm going to get fired, I'm going to get fired, that is her habit, right? So she is building that and trickling it into the matrix every single day until it happens. So you don't necessarily have to be in a state of love or fear or anything like this, right? You can catch a wave essentially, and I think that's, people call that luck, right? You can have good luck and bad luck, but you're more likely to have good luck if you are in that higher kind of energy in terms of viewing the world positively. If you view the world positively, again, the matrix is going to feed back more positive things to you. And if you are in a negative, it's just going to reflect and feedback the same thing that you put into it. But again, remember that the job of the matrix is to keep you within it. And so just always like remember that piece and aspect of it. That's why you actually have to keep repeatedly do it, because it's essentially the matrix can is going to want to debug itself. Right? So it will over time like try and find ways to correct that. But if you're constantly manifesting into it, right, the likelihood of manifestation surviving over time becomes greater, as well as the likelihood of you to have more manifestations, right? If you put 100 manifestations in and the matrix corrects 70% of them, well then you still got 30 things back out of the matrix. So that's kind of fundamentally how I envision it, and as well as like what you can do to kind of work on your manifestation. I'm getting a delivery, it's just going to be barking from here, so I'm going to stop. Okay, I'll see you guys later. Thank you. Bye.